Hey, welcome to episode 10 of Audiologues. This one was such a treat. Once again, we brought back Pat Tremblay of Tribute Games, this time with Peter Berkman of the band Anamanaguchi. And we're talking all about music and sound design for Scott Pilgrim EX. Peter and the band did the music for the previous Scott Pilgrim game back in 2010. It was great to hear stories about how their involvement came to be and what they're bringing to the table with this new game that just has so many bangers in it. We totally nerd out about the chiptune scene and early video game music as well, so I hope you enjoy it.
Peter, you're Batman. Pat, you're Robin.
Oh, for sure.
For today.
I'm typically the Robin, but I will accept the Bat duties.
Can you? Yeah, you can step up to the bat signal.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. Good. Well, we're here today to talk about Scott Pilgrim EX coming out soon. We're talking as of recording. It's in what, 2 weeks ish.
March 3rd is the date, and there's a demo out on February 14th, which when record that
Valentine's
is tomorrow,
Day.
But when this comes out, either is available or the game's out. But yeah, it's all happening really soon.
This is a game that has seeped in nostalgia for a lot of people, considering how, it's coming from the sort of original Ubisoft one that came out, it must be like 15 years ago now? It's been a while, right?
16 years ago? Something like that. It came out in 2010.
Time ago, yeah.
And, but it was like late 2010. So 15 and a half years ago, we'll say.
Right.
Yep.
And of course, Peter, you worked on that. Anamanaguchi did the music for that. So this is like a bit of a take two on that.
Somewhat.
That franchise. Yeah.
It feels entirely different, because of the like structure of the whole thing. Not only like the game itself, but like where we're at as people making music. So
right, yeah.
Yeah, it's also a bit of a take two for Tribute, I guess. Right, Pat?
In
For
some
some
way,
folks.
yeah. A lot of the folks who were involved with the production of the first Scott Pilgrim game went out to start the company to after that game and after a couple other projects, they formed Tribute Games. So for us, it's kind of a way of doing this game our way, and rhymes with where the band's at, where it's like we're all in different places.
Oh, no.
I didn't work on the original, but
yes.
we're all in different
Thanks for
places.
everybody.
We're all in sort of, and it's our way to really expand on the world, and Scott Pilgrim as a franchise is elsewhere as well. So everything was sort of in place to make this really fun adventure brawler game.
Yeah, we're going to dive into all this stuff. But I think before we really dive into Scott Pilgrim, Pat, we've had you on the show. We've learned all about your past. Maybe there's something new you can provide to us today. But Peter, it'd be cool to get a sense of where you come from, who you are. Like, how did you start into music? How did you start getting into game music for games or other media? Why don't you walk us through a bit of your history?
Yeah, of course. My history with video games goes back to being 5 years old or 3 years old and addicted to my older brother's NES. We would play in the basement all the time. And then when my sister came around, she had the Super Nintendo in her room, and I would go there and we'd play, and I'd yell at her for making me lose in Donkey Kong Country. And it was totally her fault, by the way. And I timed the
100%.
minecart jump perfectly, and so I don't make
That gives me
mistakes in
anxiety.
games, but
Just
it's
saying
the-
minecart. Like,
Yeah.
no.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so from there, growing up in such a like video game saturated environment, I also grew up with MTV, and eventually I decided that it was time to fuse the two things that dominated my life. And I learned how to play guitar when I was like 11 years old. My dad played like Irish folk songs all the time for like St. Patrick's Day and Christmas time, and he'd play Beatles songs and stuff. And I wanted to learn how to do that too because punk rock was cool. And so I got a guitar, started a bunch of punk bands, played in some like emo-ish bands, and then around like 2003, that's when I discovered chiptune music because somebody from my local town, like a local musician, this guy Kurt Feldman, who also makes video game music today, he started using this software called Nerd Tracker 2, which was like Swedish freeware that was made in a competition to make the most useless software, apparently. And
Wow.
like that's like apparently the true origin story of this software.
Nice.
So it was like a very unstable MS-DOS tracker that was meant for NES, and you couldn't easily assemble stuff out of it to play off of an NES, but people eventually figured out how to do that. And so I was in high school when I figured that out for myself. I was like 14, 15, taking the train into New York City and meeting all the people in the chiptune world, like Null Sleep, Bit Shifter, all the people who made the international chiptune music scene sort of pop off in the aughts with things like Blip Festival and 8-Bit Peoples and stuff like that. So that was like my introduction into music, video game music, and the approach that I took from it, because Anamanaguchi started my band, Anamanaguchi, the one that we wound up doing all this stuff. It used to be just me back then, and I didn't know what it was supposed to be, but I was definitely very inspired by video game music, very inspired by how a lot of video game music seemed to, especially the chiptune stuff, try to be like translating music that wasn't chiptune into its medium. I think about Mega Man 2 and how they were trying to fit like hair metal into 5 channels, like rock and roll into.
Yeah.
So you were making music with those constraints at the time, at the early stages of Anamanaguchi?
Yes. In 2003, December, 23 years ago now. That was the first chiptune file that I made in Nerd Tracker 2. But yeah, that I don't know, inspiration came from lots of different soundtracks and stuff. And after going to NYU, studying in New York, that's when the band sort of like took shape, and the lineup that we've had for 20 years happened there. So everyone that's in the band today, we've been around since that, basically.
Yeah. That's a great story. I love chiptune music, but I have to be honest, I don't know the inner workings of how that stuff works. Like you were talking about sort of some of the technology there. Is it the kind of thing where it's like a top-down, like it's like a data sheet?
Yeah.
You have like little inputs. How does one compose music that way?
I always just called it, it's like a vertical piano roll, it feels like, but it is like a spreadsheet. Yeah. It's a spreadsheet that plays at a certain speed, I guess. I was always fascinated. My uncle had a player piano in his basement, and it always felt like that, or like a music box where it's like, here's the speed that we're going to go through this spreadsheet at. And anything that happens here won't happen unless you write it down. So
yeah, I guess I always think about how much time that takes to sort of write any piece of music that way, considering how much tools we have now to make all this so much easier. It's kind of like let's go in hard mode to make any kind of music.
It was kind of out of.
Is that something that
it was kind of out of necessity back then, because a game chip or like a cartridge or whatever was what, like a couple kilobits or kilobytes, right? So you had to the music had to be generated from the cartridge or from the engine in the console. So it just had to be data at that point. So it was kind of out of necessity, where you had to fit all of your music, like 40 minutes of music, into almost no space at all.
Right.
It just had to be, like Peter said, like an Excel sheet almost.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Peter, what's your favorite chiptune track from back in the day, like in consoles and games in general?
I have so many favorites from each different era. But we made back in 2014, I think we were asked to make an 8-bit mega mix of all NES tracks for, I think it was Red Bull Music Academy or something. And
nice.
we really put it together. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Stuff from like the early, I guess, like pre-Persona games that were using extension chips on the NES. I love like Castlevania 3, Mega Man 2 obviously is like the one that I always come back to. Hard to top that one. But yeah, like if you check out that mix, it has a lot of my like weird favorites, like this obscure game Yume Penguin Monogatari, where it's like you play as a penguin dreaming, and he just has to eat a lot of food basically, but if he eats too much food he loses. It's weird, but the song is really good. And there's other Mr. Gimmick is a great game with awesome soundtrack. Tim Fallon, these are sort of like the chiptune touchstones. I love all of those.
Mine's probably Silver Surfer, the Silver Surfer game. Like there's a track in there, because what fascinates me is like I had a couple like early NES games when I was a kid, like, and one of my favorites weirdly was Nightmare on Elm Street, which is like a franchise tie-in, and not like a great Freddy game, but a cool platformer. And when you listen to that, and a couple years later, how the composers really like worked the crap out of the tools they had, and like they just used the same tools, but they just mastered every single little thing and cheat that you could do to write incredible soundtracks. Like the one from Nightmare on Elm Street's pretty cool, but like they're all sort of basic, and you listen to the first NES stuff is pretty basic, and then as you move on to the end of the generation, the guys just using the same tools, and the soundtracks they're just incredible. And
Silver Surfer is one that it's one of my favorites as well. It's something fascinating about that. Tim Fallon writing in England. I don't know if this is true exactly, but it's what I choose to believe. My thought is he composed the thing at 50 hertz, and then when it got on the NTSC consoles, like everything he made has this like extreme prog rock. Like how do you even think about this? But if you actually slow it down like 10% into the 50 hertz range, it's like, oh, this sounds like something that could have come out in the 70s, but translated. But when it's just a little bit faster, it creates this whole new genre of music. It's like proto nightcore almost. It's like
but that's true, because if you play consoles from Europe or Asia versus America, it's not on the same I want to say system, because I can't find the right word, but the actual audio will play just a bit faster and higher pitched, and it's a whole, like, the technical limitations of the day is a whole rabbit hole that I had to sort of get into when I started at Tribute, just to understand like where we all come from and all that stuff. But it's insane.
There's something fascinating about looking back at these older technologies, because we have so much at our disposal, especially in game audio with Wise, Fmod, and like meta sounds and all this crazy stuff you can do. But I'm still so much like enamored by these older technologies, and I'm almost like, that's somehow was retro, but it seems like the future because it's so cool. The idea of a console essentially being a synthesizer that's scoring the music to your game live. It's like an orchestra in the pit as the game is playing, except it's like this tiny little synthesizer that is a game console.
I love that analogy. Yeah, the pit is in the box. Like the sound chip, the 2A03 sound chip of the NES, or the OPNA sound chips of the PC-98 and stuff, or the other FM sound chips that were in the Genesis and whatnot. It's like they have a brass ensemble, and the other one has a string section or something. It is. That's what it's like. and
Yeah.
everything that comes out of that console has that feel.
Yeah, for sure. Before moving into sort of Scott Pilgrim stuff, I just want to poke your brain about. So you're talking about in those early days of you discovering chiptune music and meeting a community. It sounds like, were people performing this live? And if so, how were they doing it? Were they doing it like Anamanaguchi in a band, or were they using like game systems?
Yes.
Live. How did that work?
we were the exception, lugging on guitar amps and drums and stuff. But people like Null Sleep and Bitshifter, they were primarily composing on Game Boys, and so they would have a Game Boy with a little aux cable coming out from the bottom of it, going into their little Behringer mixer, and maybe they had another Game Boy that they were preparing the next track on at the same time. I remember Null Sleep he had added a PS2 port, not the PlayStation 2, but like the old
school mouse and keyboard port there.
Mouse and keyboard port.
Right.
Yeah.
The PS2 port would go to an old keyboard that he would use as a piano and stuff. So that would be tracked to like channel 1 square wave, and he would solo over some of the songs.
That's so cool.
It was very cool. This is 2005, 4, like up through the 10s. That was like the series heyday. Most of these guys, like, oh my god. In fact, I do have a fun story of I housed a Swedish chiptune artist for the first Split Festival in New York. This guy Go280, speaking of code and stuff, Go280 was trying to source a Commodore 64 power cable that he could use in New York. So he wound up going to like this little design firm that had one. He was like, cool, I'm gonna use this for my show tonight. And he already makes pretty fast music, but his fast music was even fast. He was surprised when he played it on the system. But yeah, so yeah, he lugged an actual Commodore 64 on stage, and just like, you wave your hands like a DJ would. And that's what these guys were doing. Yeah, so much fun.
What time was that? Like he said, nearly the 2010s. Like...
This was in 2006. This particular event.
Okay.
But it was an annual event, the Blip Festival.
I remember Game Boy battles happening on campus when I went to college in like 06.
That's sick.
So it was kind of a thing here. It was very niche, but I remember like at a local bar on campus, you'd have Game Boy battles. And people would do that. Like they'd have their chiptune tracks written on Game Boy. They used it as an audio engine and performed and all that. So it also happened here in Montreal, but albeit it's probably more niche. But I remember that. It was cool. And it always fascinated me because I had no idea how they did that.
Yeah, I guess when you say Game Boy battles, I just thought they were playing Pokemon.
It was like a live show music event that people would battle like their chiptune tracks, and just it was fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. Does this still happen? Is there still sort of a big movement of chiptune music?
There is. I'd say like it's gotten as it's gotten bigger, it's gotten more nebulous, I'd say, and less focused, less I want to say less active even. But basically, as the tools to emulate these things got better and better, there are excellent emulations of all these things. You have to enforce the limits yourself if you're trying to do that.
Right.
I think people got less excited as it got better. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but maybe who knows? For us, like we've kind of never left the chiptune thing. It seems like something that we would have moved past by now, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. For us, I don't know. I just think what the appeal is for me of the early chiptune, like video game stuff, like the big appeal to me is it's like obviously apparent programmaticness. Like it is so clearly digital music, in the same way that like if you were walking down the street around Christmas time and someone had decorations up on their house and you hear this like little chimey thing, it's like, oh, there's a chip in that little thing that's making that chimey sound, It's not playing a WAV file or an MP3. If it were playing a WAV file or MP3, it would not sound like what I'm hearing. It would sound like a string arrange, or it would sound like Frank Sinatra singing or whatever. But instead, it's like that's like what this little chip is designed to like chirp like. And I don't know. I think there's something neat about that. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we've definitely stuck with that.
It's interesting you say that because listening to some of the tracks in Scott Pilgrim X, what I distinctly noticed is that there's this, I mean, maybe it's over the many years you've been doing this kind of music that it's gone to this point where there's a real like mesh between instrumentation and like, drums, guitar, like real instruments, and the more synthy chiptuney stuff. I want to say like it sounded really like analog. Curious, like, I mean, like you must have had so much experience with it at this point that you've learned how to mix it in a certain way, or maybe you've experimented a lot with it. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I'd say like the thing that we've learned, I think the most is like back in 2006, I had a pretty good handle on how to program chiptune music and very little understanding of how to translate an analog signal into a digital signal. That is to record a guitar in my parents' basement. In fact, the first Anamanaguchi album, Power Supply EP back then, I think I had like a Fender Deluxe, like solid state amp in my parents' basement. And the first thing I tried to do was use my dad's like headset computer mic to record that. And I went line into my dad's laptop. And
that's a sound, man. That'll get you there.
It was definitely a sound. Yeah. And then by the time like my friend in college was like, all right, let's record these guitars for real, we went and had like a Pro Tools rig with an M box or whatever. I was like, this sounds like shit compared to my dad's laptop and his headset mic. But no, since then we've learned a lot about blending the guitars with the chiptune, because like the square waves are sort of like a super distorted guitar. Basically, it's like it's a brick, you know. And bands like Rat-a-Tat were very inspirational for the genesis of Anamanaguchi. Like the possibilities of like, whoa, a guitar harmonizing with a square wave can be very exciting, you know, or a saw wave filtering in as a guitar is swelling. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'd say like there's so many in Scott Pilgrim EX or X or whatever. I still, it's fun to the mystery of how to say it.
Wait, I said X, but
marketing says EX.
EX.
So it's EX.
The kids on the playground who knows what they're gonna say. But
yeah, exactly. Exactly. All the cool kids on TikTok.
Yeah, the sort of options or the range of styles in the game. There are moments where it's sort of like full digital, somewhat analog, and then like everything in between. Where since we're traveling through space and through time, it provides so much more variety than the very specific vibe that, you know, 2010 Scott Pilgrim, Toronto, you know, the aughts world that's portraying. I think the story in this game is very exciting to me, very, very contemporary, very of our weird time. Toronto is in turmoil, right? So, yeah, it's fun.
Before we dive in deeper into the whole EX and not the world, the game, I was just wondering, how did you get involved working with Ubisoft on the Scott Pilgrim versus the world, the game? Back in the day, yeah.
So I didn't know this until the 10-year anniversary of the game, but Brian Lee O'Malley, the like original creator of the Scott Pilgrim comics, actually was aware of Anamanaguchi back when the Power Supply EP came out. So
nice.
Like he was like a guy who was paying attention to cool new music. And I guess we were cool new music. So at that time. So yeah, like, you know, at that time, I think they were already making the movie had already been optioned from the books, and Edgar Wright and Brian were talking about all kinds of cool music and making CDs for each other. And apparently we were on one of those CDs. And so we weren't in the movie. So by the time the video game rolled around, Brian was like, why don't we have these guys do it? And he didn't know that we were like essentially high school kids or whatever. But I mean, we were in college, so not high school at that time, but still
close enough.
Like, yeah, they reached out to us, and the original plan was, I don't know, about I'll just say it. Like, we were supposed to like cover, I want to say like Aerosmith and stuff, and we were like, we were sort of
Chiptune?
and they also didn't want us to record guitars.
Oh,
Like, they wanted us to do everything in tracker format, like the way that you would like a Game Boy Advance game or something like that.
Right.
And we, back then when we had no one knew who we were, no one really cared. We were like, no, it's not going to be 500 kilobytes. We're going to record music, and it's going to be like 100 megabytes that you have to deal with. I'm sorry. Or
how'd that go with them?
It went well at the start, but then the game got canceled, and then it went really well because no one could tell us what to do. So
The game got canceled?
the game got canceled, and moved. This game that was like almost done,
Right.
although not quite polished. Maybe Pat knows the story more than I do, but the game was done, and I had already dropped out of school, so that was a bummer because I had no job to do, even though I was taking the semester off. So I was like, that sucks.
Jeez.
But by the time I came back from winter break, we were told, like, actually, game's back on. And it's going to be finished in China, and you are welcome to come back on at like half the price that we initially talked about for the same amount of work. And I was like, okay. The benefit to that was that we essentially, like, we answered to a guy named Simon Landry, who basically we would just send him tracks, and he'd be like, that's cool, I like this. Like, have you heard this song from this video game? And I'd be like, oh, that's cool. And then I'd like take some technical thing that happened in that video game and be like, oh yeah, now it's even cooler. And he was not telling me to do Aerosmith stuff, so that was pretty sweet.
Sounds good.
Wow, okay.
That's good direction right there.
Yeah. Games industry in a nutshell. You're on the project, game gets canned. Can you come back? It's back alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and then jumping forward to Scott Pilgrim EX, I guess Tribute reached out. Like,
Yeah,
how did that go?
with this one, with Scott Pilgrim EX, it was like, well, first of all, what happened, there was like the game, the first, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World had its 10-year anniversary. And in the wake of that, there was a lot of talk of like, well, people really seem to love this thing. There's a new generation of people who love this world. And there hasn't been anything new for it since the books ended and the movie was made. And so it was around that time that Brian Lee O'Malley was like, would you like to do music for this anime that's coming out with this guy, Joe Trapanese? And so we did this whole score for this anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It was like a Netflix plus Science Saru plus Universal combination. Sort of like, how did this happen?
Right.
Really incredible project. And it was a whole new story, whole new situation. And I think around that time, it was like, what else could we do with Scott Pilgrim? And Tribute, obviously, I mean, this is the Tribute side of the story. I just understand that, like, they sort of like kept the team were like, they kept making games and they kept getting better, and they had a bunch of hits on their hands, and they were like, we really want to make a Scott Pilgrim game. Like, how do we make a Scott Pilgrim game? And so conversations rekindled with Brian, and the idea of like a new story started coming about. And and then we wound up here. And I think our involvement was simply Brian being like, at this point, like, you guys have to be involved, basically. So
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so, yeah, maybe I'll turn it to Pat now because it sounds like, you've been on the project for quite some time, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I started a tribute almost 2 years ago, and day one was already on. It was granted
Day one
a
on Scott
very
Pilgrim, right.
prototypical project still, like not even like a first playable. But when I interviewed for the job, they told me you're working on a game with a band and you're working on a game with a composer. That's all they told me. And then day one it was like, yeah, the game with a composer is Marvel with T. Lopes, and the game with a band is Scott Pilgrim EX with Anamanaguchi. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's cool.
Dude, T-Lopes,
yeah,
so
I love
yeah,
that.
and Pete's right. Like, it was, all I know is that, the tribute guys really, really wanted to make a new Scott Pilgrim game. And for us, it would not make sense to make a Scott Pilgrim game without the band. It was like, it just made sense. And I think everybody would have been angry had we not done that. And I love writing chiptune, and I've experimented with it in the past, whatever. And I was like, I'd love to do this, but it was like, no, it has to be the band, and it has to be their touch, their direction, and whatever they do goes. And that's how it has to be. That's sort of how it has to
Right.
be, because it just makes sense. And I think, like, I'm not sure if Brian said like it's do or die, but I think we were all in agreement that putting the band back together, pun intended, including folks that had worked on the original game back then, and Anamanaguchi was really the way to go.
Even visual artists as well.
Right.
Paul Robertson coming back,
Yeah.
and the background artist, I believe, Stefan, and
Yeah,
others.
Stefan had worked on the original.
Okay.
Justin has as well. Joe and JF and all that. A lot of people who, I'm not sure who worked on sound design in the game, because as Peter mentioned, it was sort of outsourced to China at some point. I think a lot of people were involved, just adding the sounds and all that. And I feel like you can hear it where there is a bit of a disconnect between sound effects and music in the original game that I wanted to avoid, and wanted to sort of marry my style, or like my sound design
Right,
to the tracks, the music tracks and all that. So
Mhm.
I think it's great that they brought on a guy like me who could really put all of his time and effort into making that happen.
Right.
Yeah. I guess after all this time, they, with tribute games, they fully sort of leaned into the retroness of it. And so now you starting this project, like no, let's make these sound effects sound like they're from that time versus, I imagine the Ubisoft one, there's more like leeway in the sound effects. Maybe they sounded a little bit quote unquote newer.
In my
sounding.
opinion, they didn't blend very well, and I don't know who
Yeah,
was
okay,
responsible
yeah.
for it, but it's like it didn't. It felt like it almost could have been from a different game or something, and like
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like,
Okay.
And for me, it was when I experimented with a bunch of stuff and tried different styles. And when I really started to hone in the direction I wanted to take, I said to myself, what does the band do? How does Peter and the guys write? And, whether it's the first step or the second one first, usually it's, there's a chiptune version or a tracker version or a band version, a more analog, organic version of the song. And then the song is completed by adding one or the other to the track to make that signature Anamanaguchi sound. And I decided to follow the same approach, where I told myself I'm always going to add a chiptune, video gamey layer, and always have a slight organic layer to my sound as well, to rhyme with how the songs are written, and to gel with the music and create one
Right.
cohesive soundscape, and not just music with some sound design under them.
Yeah.
Right. Which is cool because when you think about those older games, I mean, the sound effects just naturally was cohesive, because I think, Peter, you mentioned like you have like 5 voices that you have to have the whole soundtrack in.
Yeah.
So when a sound effect happens, it takes up a music
Exactly.
voice. It's
well,
just-
yeah. If Mega Man decides to shoot his Buster, then you lose harmony in the.
You lose the melody or something, which is which is really
That's
cool
so-
in itself.
yeah.
And our game Panzer Paladin that came out a couple of years ago actually uses this technical limitation in a creative way.
Really?
Yeah, there's 5 audio channels, and whenever you do something that has priority in the SFX in the mix, you'll lose a harmony or melody or whatnot, and vice versa. And I didn't want to go that far because I it's really all wave based and just sample based, but I think it's a really cool thing that happened and that we still sort of try to mimic that sometimes.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it makes me think of like, in modern games when we have thousands of sounds happening at the same time and everything's bussed in a certain way. You're side chaining, so the combat to duck the ambience. It's that same kind of thing, but like microscopic in chiptune music, which is super
it's this
cool.
Stone Age of dynamic mixing in games, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it also sounds like, to compare again and move forward with the Scott Pilgrim EX stuff, you guys were in line regarding what stuff was like to keep from the 2010 game brought forward in EX. Sounds like in terms of marrying sound and music, there was some stuff to improve on. I mean, what else changes in the new game? If we could just talk broad strokes. I know the story ventures like further away from what we usually see in Scott Pilgrim stories. Like in regards to the X's and stuff, there's also more of an RPG structure from what I gather. Yeah, could we just get a like painting of like what the game is?
Sure. I'll give you my developer point of view, and then Pete can probably give you his composer, how somebody who hasn't worked on it every day for 2 years sees it. But so Scott Pilgrim EX is we call it an adventure brawler, where there's beat 'em up mechanics. Of course, it's beat enemies, and we respect that genre a lot. But we've expanded in a sense that there's an open map that you can access almost 90% of it when the game starts. But then there are also slight RPG elements where you have to update or upgrade your powers and your vitality, your strength, and all that to finish the game. And we really it's not necessarily a continuation of the graphic novels or the show or the original game. It's really taking everything that's from within this universe and using them as ingredients to create this brand new original story, brand new original game, but still sort of taking into account that all those things happened. So it's not a sort of a canon where it's following the events of. It's just acknowledging that it's kind of like a South Park episode was like, that all these things happen and you always create a new story with it. So it's kind of what we did, where it's a brand new original story that really expands the universe to a point where we go into the quote unquote future and past and sort of travel across Toronto in that way. So it's really exciting. It was really fun for the whole team, myself included, to sort of develop this brand new thing using this franchise.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it, Peter. No. Curious to hear what you say.
Yeah, like the trailer, the first trailer that comes out says something to the effect of like, Toronto's been taken over in the year 20 XDX by these like 3 like rival like superhuman factions of the vegans, who I guess are human but not quite, and then the robots and the demons, and they're each their own flavor of like an alien sort of threat. And then you have like Toronto, which is, it's almost like these like supernatural, these supernatural threats to the like world that we know of Scott Pilgrim as it was or whatever. And so, it takes us to this off the bat, like to an underground robot laboratory, to the Ice Age, to like a future, or rather to all kinds of different places that are very different than, let's explore what made Toronto special in this period from really like the aughts again. But the funny thing is, like, if you do like a tour, if you go to Toronto and you do like the Scott Pilgrim tour of like what was around in the comic books, like Honest Ed's, the like giant department store, is not there anymore. Like so many of these like landmarks, clearly the world has changed. We're not living in the aughts anymore. There's like I don't know. It's a way of playing with the I don't know, uncertainty of the time that we live in, I think. And so it's a very contemporary story. I think it's
Yeah.
I know that Brian in like setting things forward with I believe Ben David Grubinski, who worked on the anime, also helped formulate the story for this. From what I understand, they wanted to like create a world that was itself a bit mysterious. And in the way that you figure out what's going on through osmosis in a game like Dark Souls, it's like, what happened? How did this world come to be the way it is? I think that's what they're getting at with this Toronto.
That's so cool. It's so cool to hear this kind of depth that's explored in a game that, you know, it's seemingly silly presenting.
Yeah.
It's very colorful and just fun, but, you know, it's nice to see that there's this other layer happening beneath that.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore and dialogue and exposition, visually and just directly spoken to you. That really, that's really cool. That's fun to discover as you play the game, and you realize it's not just a side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's a whole.
Yeah,
there's a lot of world building in there.
Yeah. You guys did mention the sort of past and the future kind of thing, and I, you know, playing the first portion of it, I really noticed this tonal difference when you go from the future and then you dive into, you know, you're back in Toronto and there's like this like sliding shot, you see the beach, and like the music sounds way more, I don't know, nicer. So like, can you talk about the differences between those two sort of palettes of sound and like how that was created?
Yeah, well, we basically tried to take whatever task as its own isolated thing. Like that, we had this very sharp focus on not the big picture, but on the small picture, the smallest possible part of the picture. So it's like, let's say, like you say, spanning pan over Toronto Street. I'm like, okay, Scott Pilgrim, I understand the assignment. This needs to be something that feels like, you know, turning on the first game, walking through the Toronto streets. Like it has to have that nostalgic feeling, but it's not winter, it's summertime. So there has to be another element to it. But it has to feel like Scott Pilgrim. Contrast that with you're in the Ice Age fighting a dinosaur version of Todd Ingram with a cave woman Roxy holding a bass on top of him. You know, that question, it's more like, okay, what is the language of prehistoric video game music? And you instantly, Ari and I and Luke are like Bonk's Adventure, Super Nintendo, like Joe and Mac, these sort of like, it needs to have like Super Nintendo is probably the way to go there. Like you want to have like low bit samples of bongos, low bit samples of like animal roars and stuff, and lots of percussion. But then we have the added question of like, well, what is the band like? Because if Toronto Streets is like cool distorted guitars and, you know, layered in a particular way with harmonies, what is the guitar in that world in prehistoric Ice Age? And we opted for like surf. So we broke out the Jazzmaster, you know, we add a little tremolo on it. And then it's like, but it's a boss battle. And then so the surf guitar turns into metal guitar for a minute. And but yeah, that's all stuff that like it takes me, Ari, and Luke putting our heads together, like the band, looking at the particular assignment, trusting that Brian has the big picture of how it all fits together. And we just have to say to ourselves, like, we're not limited by just the NES. We're not limited by just the Super Nintendo, and the same with the band structure of what we do. Rather, like, we're limited by whatever digital and analog thing we feel this assignment calls for.
there was a big sort of another way to push forward and to differentiate ourselves from what had been done in the original game was to push the boundaries. And what I spoke about earlier with having RPG elements and a bigger map and a sort of open world and all that, we sort of had the same idea for audio, where I remember the first meetings we had with Peter, who's like, we've evolved as a band. We want to do other things. Can we be that band? Can we be ourselves? And we gave him carte blanche because it was like, yeah, of course, it's what we want. It's what we're doing. And it really showed because Peter, just explained how cool the process was. And just in terms of audio direction, I sort of pillared myself around like turn of the century or very late 90s as the present in terms of audio creation, or even like mid 90s. And then everything from the past had to be more chiptune-y, more NES, Commodore. Anything from the future, like what was the future? I think of Sonic where it goes future and it's all very FM synth and all that. And the present maybe is a mix of all that stuff because Toronto's all jumbled up. And so we sort of went with that, and the band delivered in a beautiful way. As Peter just explained, we're like all the future metal Scott stuff sounds super FM synthy and kind of like and very cold and icy, and then all the past stuff sounds like very, if you think like Donkey Kong or actually prehistoric and all that. So when we talk about how
I love that.
sound and music really gelled more in this game, it goes back to the first discussions we had, and we sort of created this past, present, and future that's a theme all around the game, and went with that and did our own thing and just started cooking, and it at the end gelled together in the way that it does now.
How'd you guys get to that, like, I guess, template or formula to be like, okay, well, past is going to be more bit crushed, present is going to be, I guess, contemporary, and future be FM? Was it like a discussion you like consciously had with like one another, or was it more of the band started experimenting with the small pictures and that inspired everything else kind of thing?
I think it was more like a subconscious agreement.
Yeah, I want to be cocky and say that great minds think alike, and we just like that's how it happens. but because I don't think we actually we kind of all agreed that was how we wanted to do it. But as far as I'm concerned, like I was looking into older games and newer games and what's future in games and that. And what I wanted initially to do was that all the sound effects for, let's say, an enemy like a demon that you encounter in the past would sound almost exclusively chiptune or let's say NES. And if you encounter that same enemy in the future, the sounds they make are different. And I was technically I remember in my audio direction document, that's the direction I wanted to go. So actual enemies or the music or players could sound different depending on where you are in time.
Right.
But I was too technically limited, or actually also time limited, to just design 3 assets for everything. So I ended up just blending stuff for future and then doing what I can to sort of, enemies you only encounter in the past would sound a certain way and just add my touch. And then the band, I think, lifted most of the heavyweights in terms of being able to write music for a certain level that happens in the past. So they really contributed more than I was able to in sort of following that direction.
Yeah, well,
yeah, it's so cool. It's great to hear how like you guys just sort of like you go all in on something. You're talking about the past and sort of caveman. You're like, okay, all in on that sound, and you create your own logic for it in that, like, that's NES, that's the NES, and then FN synth is the future. It's fun. It's like you're creating this world with its own sort of like logic that makes sense, as much as old prehistoric NES makes sense in some weird world. And just that commitment to sort of go all in. The beach scene, I have to say, the first, the music is a banger there. Like, there's like a weird like bossa nova bass, and just like, wow, I'm just on a beach, but I literally put the controller down. I was just watching. Like, this is amazing. I couldn't play. It was just, the music was so good.
Yeah, Luke cooked that one up on the Game Boy, but then I was like, it needs to feel uncanny somehow. So I added this guitar that I just mangled in all kinds of ways. Like it is a totally, but it sounds really chill despite being like completely mangled and processed and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which, yeah, we just owe to those beautiful bossa nova chords of Luke's Island. So, yeah. I added this guitar that I just mangled in all kinds of ways. Like it is a totally, but it sounds really chill despite being like completely mangled and processed and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which, yeah, we just owe to those beautiful bossa nova chords of Luke's Island. So, yeah.
Cool. On the topic of, Pat, you're talking about creating the sound effects. At the same time, there's a lot of music in this game. It's happening all the time. It's very forward. It grabs your attention. How did you think about creating these sound effects to sort of work in tandem? Did you try to lean into sort of like tonality to actually be in the same key here and there? How did you think about that?
Yeah, the band's music is, as Peter explained earlier, is saturated by its nature. Distorted guitars, square waves, pulse waves, and all that stuff. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that the game has a lot happening, both visually and in terms of audio. Like there's a lot of music and there's a lot of sound effects, and every punch lands, but I was very conscious to design sound effects that work with whatever the song was in that level, whatever the vibe is for a boss. And you hear it even when you defeat a boss. There's one sound that plays as kind of this, jingle or whatever. And there is one for each boss in the tonality of that specific boss track, because you're listening to the track, you're vibing, and the last thing I want is for some random sound to play that has nothing to do with the song. So I transposed all of those sounds unique to the boss fight. Same goes for the actual boss sound effects. When you play Quest, even the Quest, I'm not sure in the demo you can fight the Todzilla boss, but as you progress, there are bosses that are more and more musical. There's a really great boss fight in Quest 7 that I'm not going to spoil. It's just incredible, and the guys did a great job as well. And there's a musical attack, and every attack is a note from whichever key that boss fight song is in. So being a musician myself, I am very conscious of those things, and I think it's really important to serve this, especially in a beat 'em up and when like Scott Pilgrim, where it's like my job is to serve the game, serve the song, and fit in that, and not try to plant a flag and be like, listen to the sound design. No, it's like listen how the sound design and the music gel together and make for a fun experience. So to quickly answer your question, every time I even went back and did a lot of stuff because the guys decided to write a song in E flat or whatever. And I'm like, oh, my sounds were in E sharp or whatever. Or E sharp's not my thing, but like in F or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'll transpose. I'll go back in my DAW and transpose everything to make sure it fits. And when I finish my sound effects for a boss fight, for example, I put the boss track in my session, and then I listen to all of those, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. It all gels, and then I'll export my assets.
Cool, right? And so you're talking about some of these boss sounds fitting tonally wise, but what about some more systemic sounds, like the player character sounds? Did you manage to swap that stuff out too, or did that manage to stay the same?
Well, I wish I could have, but again, there's some technical limitations that had I had a middleware or something, I maybe would have transposed the actual player character sounds depending on, but I didn't do that. So I had to then revert back to another kind of concept where every boss fight is in minor. And when I do like these musical tricks, because when you back in the day when they did sound effects, it was all musical, right? It was like long musical phrases that you would compress so much that they sound like just blurbs and sound effects. So I did a lot of that, and so all the boss fights are in minor unless the boss fight track is not, or I'll use the relative minor so that their bosses, they're bad, they're in minor, and all the players are in major because they're our friends and they're in major. So a really basic concept, and then I went for okay, Ramona is the basis is for the entire story. She's the root of everything, so she'll be in C major because it's C major. So all of her sounds are more in C major, and all of her special attacks and all that. So then Scott Pilgrim plays bass. What's the first string on a bass? It's E. Everything's sort of an E or pentatonic major. And so I was always thinking about these things where it's like, how can I make it musical because it's Scott Pilgrim? How can I fit with the band's music? And how can I have my own little ideas and pillars that define every character? And so like Patel has a completely different vibe than Roxy, and they all have their own tonalities, their own root key, and their own flavor to their sounds.
Love to hear that kind of creative solutions to basically trying to match everything and make it cohesive. Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like having no middlewares kind of brought limitations, but would you say that some of them brought like unexpected advantages or made things a bit more, I don't know, authentic in line with the retroness of the game?
Well, yeah, it's a big thing at Tribute where we want to stay authentic and sort of not use tools that we don't have to. Okay. I'm not going to lie and say I wish I didn't have. Yeah, I didn't wish I had Fmod for this game because I think sidechaining, dynamic mixing, dynamic EQ, and all that stuff were lifesavers on Marvel, and I wish I had it on Scott Pilgrim as well. But not having it for me really limited me in terms of technical and sort of creativity, where it's like working on an 8-track where it's like, all right, guys, we've 8 tracks. Let's just see what we can do and bounce things, put it on track 1. So then we, like the Beatles did and whatnot. So for me, like the idea of having variations was probably out the window on week 1, where it's like, no, I'm not going to like creating quote unquote random containers in our engine is kind of a pain in the butt. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. It's going to sound... So all these things indeed sort of helped me make a more bare bones games in terms of assets. And then the rest, like, that's where I went like, okay, this is how they would have done it back in the day. So I can also do it and I'm not going to complain about it. And afterwards, it was just, the last mix commit I did probably 3 days ago was me just bringing down more stuff because I'm like, this is too loud. The music needs to be the priority, and this could be a bit loud, but it's just setting myself up where 4 players are going to play this. It's going to be chaos. So how do I sort of control this chaos by entering a value in the Excel sheet that is our audio engine on this game?
Oh,
and how do I, okay, this needs to be, 45, and it's a arbitrary value, and I know that 45 is not loud. So you get to know the tools and you get to know how to work around these limitations, but in the end the product is really cool.
Yeah, considering how it doesn't sound like tech wise there was a whole lot for you to work with, how did you guys manage interactive music? Was it more bare bones, kind of like just play this track here and shoehorn it in, versus having a kind of adaptive interactive music system?
It's kind of it's a mix of both, because if you look at so we use the same engine for TMNT, for Marvel, for this, but we add on a lot of stuff because Scott Pilgrim is a much more complex game. But in essence, it's an engine made to create beat 'em up games. So for every level or area, I could implement a music track. So I did that for a lot of the areas. So Peter was mentioning the suburbs. There's a whole corridor for the suburbs, plays that track. But then I can add through cutscene actions, I can change the music as well. And then every boss fight or every wave of enemies is considered an event in our engine. And in there, I could also change the music. So, and it's just like it fires a new music track all the time. And in the shops, I could do the same. So we built these sort of tools to make it feel like it's adaptive, but it's just a conductor under the hood going, play this track, play that track. And when this happens, play that track again. And I'm sort of, any dynamic or adaptive music system is fake. Is just like, it just happens to be that way. And for me, it was just sort of creating the illusion that there's a whole system happening, but it's just firing track after track after track.
Okay, so it's not a sort of like you have 20 stems and you pick and choose which one play based on player health and et cetera, right?
No. Okay. I wish we could have done that. And I know the original Scott Pilgrim game had that, at least in the first level, where like the more you come in, the more the band comes in.
Okay.
And fades in and all that. That was really cool. But I would have rather serve every cutscene moment, and I didn't manage to do it. And I remember like Peter, like 2 days before we have to submit for our final submission, like, please guys, can you just please put the song in? And I'm like, dude, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. And we found a way to create a cutscene that all it does when you enter and you have this quest. Okay, let's play. Managed to do like 90% of it, and there's still stuff that Peter wrote that I just didn't have the tools to put in the game. But in the end, it was sort of finding a compromise to make sure that almost every moment had somebody saying, "Okay, play this track."
Okay, it sounds
and I guess it wasn't mentioned before, but it's just you on this project as far as in-house at Tribute.
Yeah,
or maybe you had some help with other folks, or just you?
Same as, and I was working on Marvel and this in tandem at the same time. And luckily, the crunches for those were somewhat offset, because when I was first, I guess, on your podcast, I just finished my crunch for Marvel, and then after that, like right before the holidays, went into another really intense crunch for specs. But it's just it was almost self-induced again, where I wanted to make the best game possible, and Pete did the same, where the game was almost done and we replayed it, and Brian had a bunch of notes, Peter had a bunch of notes, and they just started delivering more and more content, and I started implementing it as well. And it was a lot of work, but as soon as I found a way to, like, the sort of process I described earlier of creating my assets, creating a character, a boss, or a moment happened really fast, because I had this one process where I would use a plugin from Matt Montag I mentioned earlier that's called NES, that has these 5 channels, like a square wave and a triangle wave and a noise wave. And I start from that, create my sound, and I'm like, okay, this works. And once I have which key the character is in, how they feel, and the sort of direction, creating assets is relatively easy.
Talking about creating assets, Peter, I'm wondering, writing music as a band for a game, how does that typically go about? It feels like it must be different than writing music for like records or basically for yourselves, right?
Yeah, there's something beautiful about the assignment. That's the best part, right? Like, the track list is made in advance by the needs of the game, the needs of the project. And the variety therein is so big on this one. Where, we have to go from, the robot lab to the suburbs, to the beach, to the vegan fight, to the prehistory ice age, to Casa Loma, but it's like evil demon castle, and you have to make something that's sort of like Symphony of the Night vibes, and then and then there's a boss fight in the demon lair, but then there's another boss fight in the demon lair, and it has to be even more terrifying and alien, and stuff like that. So as a band, the beautiful built-in part of having not just me but Ari and Luke, we're all equally skilled musicians. We're all we have different strengths, and so when it comes time to like divvy up the work, it's honestly, it was so natural to be like, this is mine, this is yours, this is yours, and we all just like agreed. And everyone's strengths, we all know what we're attracted to music wise, and it just works out. Where I know that Ari excels in the minor stuff, Luke excels in like technical, exciting stuff. I excel at like simple and like thematic stuff maybe, and we all got to like even like LARP as each other a little bit, be like, oh, I'll try a technical one, or I'll try my hand at a minor one, but cool. We'll know that that's us playing on our like, not our back foot, but on our unusual side. And so that's like the basic joy of it all, is like, all right, we're not just writing one shop theme, we're writing like 5 shop themes. And so and I will say, someone who I haven't mentioned yet, who I think is like really a big star in all of this, is Casey Diorio. He is the engineer he's the guy who runs this spot called Valve Studios here in Dallas, where I live. And Casey is this like brilliant producer, mixer, composer in his own right. But we knew that since we were recording live drums, recording them in Ari's basement like we did in 2010 was not going to fly. So we recorded them at Valve, where Casey just has such an ear and such knowledge for how like different stuff is going to work in his room with his microphones and all of that. So we had to get all this stuff done like relatively quickly. You know, you don't want to mess around in the studio. You know, we'll come in and yes, we have to do the Symphony of the Night style, like almost 9 Inch Nails-y dark drum thing, and then pivot instantly to like a Stevie Wonder shop theme. And and Casey is like, all right, let me switch the hi-hats. And then he'll like muss with some like knobs on his gear, and it sounds perfect. It's like, that sounds like a Michael Jackson record. It's like, thank you, Casey, for giving me stuff that I don't have to like mix. I have like these room mics. He put up 3 room mics. All the drums were recorded with 3 different pairs of room mics, and there are room mics on every single drum track for every one of these mixes that I made. And I never touched. There's no EQ on any of the room mics. They're just perfect. It's like one of these 3 is going to work for what you're doing. And maybe I'll do a blend of 2 of the different mics, but the way that he set them, it was like, and that he had them recorded going into his system, they were like, it's do as much. This is like the analog world, is do as much before the process as possible. And so Casey was definitely our guide in getting excellent, usable, like you don't have to touch them that much audio tracks to work with. And the same wound up being true with the guitars. We wound up going pretty like, I think it's the best the band has ever sounded. So it's kind of crazy. All the work that went into it. Yeah.
I love the way you describe things. It really makes everything sound like it's this wacky variety show. You're like, now here's something completely different. And it's so fun. And considering how it's, you know, a whole band making this music, you know, oftentimes when you think of a game soundtrack, you know, the thing you think about is like a strong theme that's then reused, and there's permutations of a single cell of a theme. And I imagine all that stuff kind of goes out the window for something like this that's changing on a dime. Or are you actually
there is a through
thinking
line,
about
but the
musical
through
themes?
line is sort of buried. And Earthbound, I think, was an inspiration for Brian in this way, story-wise, where you know, the band gets kidnapped, and then the plot of the game is you find all the instruments, and then you find all these melodies associated with the instruments, and the melodies open up portals to different parts of time and space. And so there is I don't know, there's something cool about like Bill and Ted in fiction, like Wild Stallions. They're a good example of like a song that like traverses time. But in Earthbound 2, there's that like forgotten melody and stuff. So that's part of the story of the game. And yeah, without like spoiling, I don't know how you spoil something that is steeped in obscure lore, but that's sort of part of the thing. But it's not in an overt way. It's in a very like, there's a through line, that you sort of have to play the game to feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. And people who listen, because you can always, it's like in any type of media where you can just take it in at surface level and have a good time. But both with visual Easter eggs and references and all that, and with audio, there's something, and in sound effects as well. There's as Peter said, there's a sort of theme that goes along the game, along with the chaos that Dami were talking about, where it's like, it's a wacky variety show where we go past and present and this and that and whatnot, and it's crazy. But what's really cool is that the band kept a sort of a theme, a through line, a direction that goes from the first cutscene to the last boss fight. And that makes for a very wacky but controlled soundtrack, I think, and a really rockin' one at that, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean that's a skill. I mean, maybe people listening to this and myself included, who've been in bands trying to write music together, knows that things are chaos. And I've made albums in the past, and sort of every song sounds so different because someone's taking it into a different direction, and then sometimes can lose its cohesiveness. So I feel like there's a kind of understated skill that you guys have to be able to do this as so many people. Yeah.
The
cool.
band, we all trust each other a lot, and we all we like each other's taste, and we understand that we're all very different from each other, but we sort of take for granted that, like, since we are friends and since we agree with each other in some ways, since we like trust each other, whatever we make is going to be what it's supposed to be. And just seeing whatever that thing is through to the end, trusting the vision, and then maybe adding to it, maybe suggesting modifications or whatever. But and the same trust, I'd say, extends to Tribute and to Brian as collaborators in this, where there's clearly a vision, there's clearly, work going into it that, like, we just got to trust the process and sort of make ourselves as useful as we can be. And I felt like, I know, it was so much fun. The crunch time hit us as well, but that's to be expected with such a big project. But everybody wound up flying here from the band to Dallas, and it was like a giant sleepover where it was a blur that, like, lasted a couple weeks, and we were like, holy shit, we did it. That's fucking crazy. Sorry.
So kind of curious in Crunch, because you were talking about how you recorded all your stuff at, you said Valve Studios.
Valve, yeah, that's where we recorded the drums and the guitars and all that stuff. Yeah.
So when you're in this crunch period, and let's say you want to record more stuff, how did that work? Did you have, like, time allotted for, like, a couple weeks where you could just use it whenever you want?
No,
or did you have to...
we had specific days that we were going to be there, and
right. Okay.
And we the so much is the get it right before you record. So Luke, my God, dude, Luke is such a great drummer. Like, it would be like, all right, Luke, you're recording 15 songs today, and again, it's the variety of, like, double kick death metal into, like, extremely precise light bossa nova playing to, like, big band music to whatever else it is, like. And Luke didn't fuck up. It's kind of, not only didn't fuck up, but, like, with all the takes that we got for every song, there would always be one take where Casey and I in the control room would be like, that was amazing. And, like, every day we would be, like, recording videos of Luke just drumming in the live room, and I would send them to Brian and be like, dude, you don't understand, like, this sounds unbelievable. Like, because we had scratch tracks made out on the on whatever software we were composing the song with, and it would always be like, oh, this is really cool, this really fits. But the second that you hear, like, even just like a room mic of, like, a cymbal hit on something, it's like, it takes it into a new dimension of, like,
yeah, it makes it sound real.
Yeah. There's like, suddenly there's people in a room making music, and that's why I felt very, very good about the way that Casey set up these room mics. They're like, that's, I think, really the unsung hero of the sound, or rather, they're the true subliminal through line of the entire soundtrack. There is always a room mic. I think that's
what I mentioned before. What I mentioned before, that analog meets chiptune. I guess that's what I'm probably reacting to, is that in the recordings, you really hear the room. You really hear that it's a lived-in sound. That's the analog sound I'm talking about. Yeah, it's a really great blend to get that. That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's cool.
And it
like
sounds
even
like
in the start of the
you-
game, you have Metal Scott kidnapping the band members at band practice in their room and scattering them, all over the place. So I don't know, man. The game
Right.
is really good. It's a good game. I love thinking about it. I love playing it. I've played through it so many times. All the
Dude,
different builds that we get.
Yeah.
it's like I've been playing this game in some form for 2 years. And look, I'm not trying to sell copies here, but I would still do a playthrough. If you guys after this were like, you guys want to play, I'd still do it because I still have fun because we put so many ingredients in there to cause so much randomness and chaos that is so fun that every time you do a playthrough, there's like, I burst out laughing because some weapon hit another weapon that hit you, and then you fall on a skateboard and you cross the entire. It's super wacky and super fun, and like we still at Tribute enjoy playing the game after all this time. So it's really something, and just like a lot of music changes happen very fast in this game because you go from area to area, or so it's like for me, like a playthrough sometimes is like, okay, I'm gonna take it slow and just listen to this track and just spend more than 15 seconds in the shopping district. I'm gonna spend like 2.5 minutes and read everything, but also listen to the track. So there's different sort of experiences of how you can play this game, and one of them that's really cool is just listening to the badass soundtrack.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me want to play. So I feel like,
Oh, and
let's
the
jump in
online
the future
co-op
or something.
works. I just have to mention to anybody watching this, the online co-op actually works in this Scott Pilgrim game.
Wait, does that mean it didn't work in the other one?
Yes. Yeah. On YouTube, we
Not the
were
big shade.
invited by Nintendo to do an interview where we were going to play through the game, and
way.
it crashed. We couldn't get through the first level.
Oh my
with
god.
Nintendo.
Oh,
They were like,
we have
okay, that's weird. That
no, we have full-time people dedicated to making sure that this game is drop in, drop out, multi-platform, cross-platform. I mean, and I could be playing on anything, you could be playing on anything else, and you just drop in and we have a good time and you drop on. There was a lot of figuring out, a side note, that because it's a bit RPG oriented, where there's leveling up and there's money, and do we share the money? Do we share stats? How do you, if I go on Pete's game and I progress, when I go back, do I have my progression saved to my game? And I'm not going to pretend where I knew how they achieved it, but we sort of, there's a compromise in there it's really cool where, it works. And there's people, Frankie and Nick and people I have to shout out that have worked tirelessly to make sure that online mode is pristine.
Ugh.
not only does it
Man,
work,
I really look forward to
it really
playing it.
works.
Yeah. It really works.
Trademark.
And it's fun
really
too
works.
because the you can climb on to somebody else and they could on their head and they can transport you, and you can juggle with weapons, you can play volleyball if you want to, and it's really focused on, and that's something we really love at Tribute, is making really cool co-op games. And this one nails it because there's so much interaction to have, and there's an Easter egg I don't want to spoil, but there's something I hope people, that's really hard to achieve, but in multiplayer, something musical people could do that I wish people discover soon enough and start doing.
Interesting.
But I'm not going to spoil anything, but I want to see, my dream is to see videos of people having fun with that system, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, there's a lot of interplay and interactivity in that co-op mode.
Nice.
Super cool, man. I played the demo like 5 times. Every time I got to the end of it, I was like, I want so much more of this, and I was just like, I'll replay the whole thing again. It's fine. But I totally look forward to playing this co-op. Dan and I will we'll play co-op. It'll be a great time
For sure.
Yeah.
Feels like we're nearing the end of the interview, but before we go, I feel like there is a sort of through line that we talked a lot about the world, the game, and EX, and like parallels between the learnings that were made from one and another game. And feels like it ties nicely with the idea that, let's say in 10 years of time or whatever, whenever there would be an EX2 or something, possibly, there's learnings to be made for sure. Looking back and seeing like everything you guys mentioned about the world, the game, to now. And I guess, it ties in with our final question that we always ask. That's basically, you guys have any piece of advice you'd like to give your past selves as you hopped on the project now that the game is basically shipped?
Honestly, I'm just really stoked with how it came out. I don't.
Nice.
I legit don't.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I would say like make it so you don't have to crunch as hard, but I don't care. Like that just comes with the territory. So
Yeah.
no, I don't. I wish I had better advice for myself, but no, I'm very happy.
Sounds like the crunch I wanted to ask before, so it's like circling back and everything. But Pat mentioned how the crunch for the two projects he was working on was like nice, and the timing was split.
Yes.
But you guys released an album recently and went on tour this fall. I guess
Our
this
crunch
didn't
was
help
not
the
so
crunch.
nicely split. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We
Nice, okay.
Well, okay. Here's something. Yeah. So I thought that I would be able to get much more done on tour because we
Okay.
were on a tour bus. We put an album out called Anyway, and we did a 35-date tour on a bus. So we were out for like a month and a half, and I got a new Alienware laptop that like works great, and I had my interface. I had all this stuff ready to go, and I found myself completely unable to even write anything. I was like, no, I can't crunch like this and like that at the same time. And the other band members felt similarly. And then when we got home from tour, then I was like, oh God, the deadline is here. The deadline is right here. So we flew everyone. We all came to Dallas, the three of us. And we had already recorded a lot of drums, but there was a lot of stuff that hadn't yet been written. So, well, that's what you'd think, but it turns out like we kind of just did it, and it turned out,
Right.
I'd say, as good as it possibly could, even if we had so much extra time. I don't know what I would do with extra time.
It sounds like this is one of these projects that just kind of came naturally. It's like you're speaking your mother tongue almost in a way. Not every album project is like that. Some are harder than others, but this one was quite natural. It sounds like.
I think it speaks to Brian Lee O'Malley's sort of clarity of vision for how he wants this game to feel. And it's just like when he described it, I'm like, I get it. When there's a question of like, so what's going on in this area? And he'll just say like a sentence. I'll be like, okay. And, Luke will get it. Ari will get it. And we can describe that even to Casey, the guy like setting up the room to sound the way it should. And he'll be like, yep, gotcha. 100%. And then it'll just be that way. And then when it comes time to mix it, we just try and keep hold of that vision. And then we share it with Pat and Gaming Ray, the legend. And typically they'll be like, I mean, that's the other thing is like they trusted us so much, and that's such a luxury that I think about notes that people might be subject to. I've notes that we've gotten from other projects where it's like, how about no? How about like I want to tear my brains out? But no, with these guys, like if Tribute had a note, it would be so yes, because it would be so clear that it needs to be that way. Or like it would be like a technical thing or something. But yeah, the trust was mutual going into this. So we were so like they're the best people to work with. So yeah,
it's good good direction informs good design, good work. So it sounds like that's a big part of it. I want to kind of flip this on its head. Let's say you didn't get good direction. How do you deal with that? Let's say the direction's not what you wanted, but you know what? You still want to make banger music. How do you go about flipping it so that you could deliver on that?
That's very difficult, I would say. And I've been in those situations before where somebody wants something and it's vague, and you try to like do something to compensate for that unclarity, and then they might not even like what you did, and then those projects, if they come out, I try to avoid being in that position. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
Right on. I guess the same question to Pat. What advice would you give your past self on this project?
Well, it's funny. One of them was, and everybody attributes the same. I wish I knew how big this game was going to get in scope. Because when we first, if you read the initial game design document and the first playable prototype and all that, it's not the game that we're shipping in 2 weeks. It was a lot smaller, more streamlined, and we just added more and more, and like an event and this and that. And I wish I had known this was going to happen, because I feel bad. And at some point, Pete, our sort of telepathic relationship that we had all through production, at some point they played a new build of the game and they're like, we need to add like 50% more music to this game. And I didn't want to impose, because I knew I had a certain time I needed to respect, and I'd already asked for 15 tracks and references and directions and ideas and all that. So I didn't want to ask for even more. I was going to be content with the minimum, not that they provided the minimum, but a couple levels, a boss fight and whatnot. And like Peter was like, yeah, but we can't do that, man. It's so much bigger. And so the crunch he just talked about, just coming back from tour, I swear they delivered 50% more music, and it took like something like 3 weeks or something, and they just
and we were happy to do it because it's awesome.
But I wish I'd known that and would have been able to give them as good direction as I was able to for the first stuff. But after that, our like Peter said, our trust and sort of our common direction and our love for the franchise, the game itself, really worked out, because everything they delivered was awesome. So I was really lucky for that. But like track after track after track, and there was one session where we were together, and I know that Peter was mixing and like, okay, this track is in the file and whatever. Okay, I'll put it in the game. And
dude,
it's really like there was a couple nights like that. It was really
Ari
crazy.
And Luke were like sitting on the ground in the background of my studio.
And Ray, our producer, everywhere. And I were just like, okay, the track came in. Let me normalize it, put it in the game. Okay, it works, man. There's cool. So it was a lot of fun, But I kind of wish I had known how big it was going to get, even though I'm happy with the result.
Man, the question of scope. Sometimes I ask myself, will game developers ever learn from it? I just feel like maybe. Maybe one day someone will.
Cool about Toby Fox having chapters. That's very cool. Love a chapter. Love an episode.
Yeah,
it's cool.
He would have chapters in
Deltarune. Yeah, they all come up like chapters per chapters, and they take their time with it, the time that's needed.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what's fun about this game is that if it does really well and we'd ever want to do a DLC or something, we could just place a portal somewhere and just open a door to a new dimension, and there we go. There's a whole other map or something. So, we've definitely set the sort of pieces for that to happen at some point. I really wish, I hope the game does well and we get the chance to do that, because I want to do more. Like, I want to keep working in this world and with these great tracks and this fun sound design process and all that.
Let's not wait 10 years for the next one.
Yeah.
We're 16, right?
Yeah.
Right, 16.
Jeez, that's so long.
Yeah, a long time. Well, it sounds great. The game sounds great. The game plays really well. Good job to both of you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And shouts outs to the people I'm repping who are not here. We got Ari, Luke, James, the bass player, Casey Diorio, Mike Fridman, who helped us set up the drums for mixing and everything. Shouts out to the whole gang there.
Cool, man. Well, I guess that's it. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time. And have a great day.
Thanks,
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcast about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org.